Hi, I'm Joe Reilly. This video is part of our continuing series on the job of a DOT specimen collector. And one of the parts of the collection process that occurs from time to time is when a donor has a shy bladder. Tom is my donor today, and we're going to talk through the shy bladder process. Thanks, Tom, for joining me.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
And I know Tom is going to have some questions about the shy bladder process, but let me go ahead and start it off. So shy bladder refers to the donor is not providing enough urine or not providing any urine. And it's a process, and we document that process with a form called the shy bladder log, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. But first, I want to talk about when does the shy bladder process start? And it only starts when, as the collector, I'm going to give the specimen cup to the donor, and Tom, I'm going to ask you to go to the restroom and provide a specimen. And so he goes to the restroom, and then he comes out, and unfortunately, he's got none, or he's only got a small amount. That's when the shy bladder process starts. Now, sometimes a donor may say, well, I can't go right now. And the donor has to try anyway. So I often kind of joke, Tom, you know, when you say to the kids, we're getting ready to go on a trip, you need to go to the restroom, what do they say?
I don't need to go right now.
Okay, what do the parents say?
You can go try anyway.
The parents say, go try anyway. So the shy bladder starts when you got the donor went in the restroom, you got none or not enough quantity, which is less than 45 milliliters, the line right there. It's now what we call insufficient quantity. We start the shy bladder process. And really, to do this right, I teach collectors, take that custody and control form and put it to the side. You're only working on the shy bladder log until the shy bladder process ends. How does the shy bladder process end? Well, Tom either provides a good specimen, 45 milliliters, ready to be packaged up and sent to the lab, or 3 hours expires and Tom still can't give me any urine. I've got to document that entire shy bladder process. So I start my form. I put today's date, I put my name as the collector, I put Tom's name as the donor, time in the initial collection, 9 a.m., 10, 11, 12. We may go till 12 o'clock. So I put that down. Time plus 3 hours. A lot of collectors struggle with that. Just write down the time plus 3 hours. What time is it? So now we know what time it ends unless we get that full specimen. Then during the process, we can give the donor up to 40 ounces of water spread out reasonably over 3 hours. If the donor doesn't want to drink any water, that's fine, not a problem, not a refusal. But I'm going to document each time I'm going to give some fluid. So Tom, I'm going to give you 10 ounces of water at 9:05. We're both going to initial the form. And whenever you're ready and you think you can go again, we'll try again. But remember, we're going to need a full 45 milliliters, and we can't mix them together. So you want to make sure you can really go. So then I give you some more water. We document it. You make an attempt. If it's successful, great. We can move down the form. If the attempt is unsuccessful and we still have an insufficient quantity, we document that there. So at 9:30, you tried again. We have an insufficient quantity, and we both initial that. So we kind of follow the form. The left-hand side is about giving water to the donor. The right-hand side is about the donor making additional attempts to provide the sufficient specimen. Now, if I've got a donor in this 3-hour process, I like to call the DER and let them know. I call the employer and let them know because they're wondering, why aren't you back yet? Okay, you're sitting here for 3 hours. I'm also going to call the DER when the process ends and let them know the outcome. Let them know that we got a good specimen, Tom's on his way back, or we didn't get a good specimen, the 3 hours has expired. I'm going to explain what the employer does about that in just a second. So as we go through the documentation of what happens in the 3 hours, and we get to the bottom of the form, one of two things happens. either one, the donor provided a good specimen at, let's say, 10:15. We have the donor sign this form and it's completed. We go back to our custody and control form and we complete that. Alternatively, our 3 hours has expired. The donor cannot provide a specimen. We put the time here. It should match the time we had up on top. It's 12 noon. The donor signs. We call the DER. We're going to be finishing our paperwork. Tom's been here for 3 hours. We are dismissing him because he couldn't provide a specimen within 3 hours. So we're now done with this shy bladder log. We've completed it in its entirety. We can put this off to the side and we can finish up with our custody and control form, or CCF as we call it. We should always complete a CCF form once we've started a collection. We should always put the donor name on copy 2, step 5, no matter what happens in the process, put the donor name. And on copy 1, the collector should always sign date and timestamp copy 1, step 4 of the collection process. If there's no specimen, nothing goes to the lab. We still distribute the MRO copy, the employer copy, the collector copy, which I would retain, and if the donor wants their copy, they can retain. So now we're done with that collection. We've got a completed shy bladder log, and we've got a completed custody and control form. Now, I know, Tom, we were talking earlier, and you said you had a few questions.
Yeah, so I think some of the questions that come up, if you've got everything has to be on the custody control form, how do you reference that with the custody control form and pair those up?
So great question. So we always want remarks on the custody and control form, but there's only a very small line for remarks. So all the stuff I talked about documenting here, we can't fit that on the custody and control form. So what we do is we give a very short remark, insufficient quantity, no specimen received, good specimen received at 9:45, whatever it is, and then we say, see shy bladder log. This way there's a reference that there's another piece of paper for additional notes about that collection event.
Okay. And then during that shy bladder process, can the person leave, go out to their car, come back, any of those kind of things, or do they have to basically sit there the whole time?
So basically the donor can't leave the facility, and the collector or someone at the facility should be monitoring the donor. If the collection's being done at the employer's place of business, again, either the collector or an employer, DER, or supervisor should be monitoring the individual. And the bottom line is no, they can't leave the facility.
Okay. What happens if it's close to closing time and the collector's wanting to close, but that 3-hour window hasn't elapsed yet?
Yeah, so we're talking about a DOT urine specimen collection, and there are certain rules that apply, and these rules are DOT regulatory rules, and the DOT says that, yes, you're staying open. You need to be there available for the 3 hours for that collection.
Okay. And so what if the person just says, hey, I don't have time for this. I've got to go pick up my son, my daughter, or make another appointment, or whatever the case may be. How is that going to get handled in this particular situation?
Yeah, so we're in the shy bladder process, for example, and you're saying halfway into it or 30 minutes into it, the donor says, I'm leaving for whatever reason, or it doesn't say anything and just leaves. So now the collector's got to provide additional documentation and note what happened. Okay, what did they say? Did they just disappear? Documentation, documentation, documentation. What happened? The paperwork is still completed. Nothing goes to the lab because we don't have a specimen. MRO copy goes to the MRO. Employer copy goes to the employer. And now an employer, designated employer representative, the person in charge of the program at the employer, has to make an important decision. And that decision is that this donor refused the test.
Okay. And so if say they don't refuse, but they can't provide that specimen, that's kind of the last part of this is what happens now?
Yeah, great question. Kind of the last part of it. Yeah. Okay. The 3 hours expires, the donor goes back to work. What happens now? So what the regulations require is that the employer give the donor, so they would give you, Tom, an opportunity to see a physician, to see if there's a medical reason why you can't provide a urine specimen within 3 hours, where most humans can provide a urine specimen within 3 hours. And that physician must be someone that the employer and the MRO together determine that they approve of that physician that's going to do this medical evaluation. So it's not necessarily your private doctor that you play golf with, okay? So you go to that physician, they either document a medical explanation or don't document a medical explanation. In the case of the documentation for the medical explanation, that test would be excused. You still may need another test if it's pre-employment or return to duty, because you need a negative result to get back into the job. A post-accident, reasonable suspicion, time frame's been expired, it's just kind of a canceled test. A random, it's kind of an excused random because it's not a surprise any longer, okay? If there's no medical explanation or you refuse to go see a physician, it's a refusal. You're removed from the safety-sensitive position, and to get back into that job, you'd have to go through the substance abuse professional rehabilitation process.
Got it. So it sounds like, there's some challenges, and it's mainly going to be documentation, knowing the procedures to be able to take care of this appropriately. Because if you don't, I can see several places along this pathway that things could go wrong and could create problems with the test.
Absolutely. So the collector needs to know what they're doing. The collector should always use the shy bladder log. The collector should document everything, follow the procedures, follow the guidelines. Appreciate you being with us here, Tom. Collector training, there's more to come. Watch for the next video, and thanks for joining us.